The invisible woman. I used to think being nice was my superpower. I believed that my willingness to help, to listen, to bend myself into whatever shape people needed would eventually lead to recognition, gratitude, maybe even love. I was wrong. My name is Sophie Chen, and until 6 months ago, I was invisible. Not literally, of course. I took up physical space, 5 feet 4 inches of it, to be exact. People could see me when they needed something. Sophie, can you cover my shift? Sophie, would you mind taking notes at this meeting? Sophie, the kids need to be picked up from soccer practice, and I have happy hour with the guys. I was visible when convenient and invisible when not. A human convenience, like a vending machine that dispensed favors instead of snacks. The perfect employee. Kendall Davis and Associates was a mid-sized marketing firm in Chicago where I'd worked for 7 years. I was good at my job. Excellent, actually creating digital marketing campaigns that consistently performed above benchmarks. Not that anyone noticed. Sophie, you're a lifesaver, Kendall would say, patting my shoulder as he took my presentation slides and added them to his deck before meeting with clients. When raises and promotions came around, Kendall had different phrases. It's just not your time yet, or, you know how it is, budgets are tight this year. Meanwhile, Ryan from the desk next to mine got promoted after 9 months. Ryan, who regularly asked me to just look over his work, which basically meant fixing it entirely. Ryan, who once asked me if analytics reports really mattered that much. But I smiled and congratulated him, then stayed late to finish the campaign he'd left hanging when he went out to celebrate his promotion. You're too nice, my mother used to tell me. People take advantage of nice. The perfect wife. Home wasn't any different. I'd been married to Derek for 8 years. He was handsome in that rumpled, intellectual way. Tousle brown hair and wire-rimmed glasses, and worked as an architectural designer. I'd been so proud when he landed a job at a prestigious firm right after we got married. Our house was always filled with his architect friends discussing revolutionary designs over expensive whiskey I'd bought with my own money, but never drank. I'd cook elaborate meals for these gatherings, then clean up while they continued their conversations in the living room. Sophie's amazing, Derek would say when someone commented on the food. She keeps everything running, like I was the household appliance that made their real lives possible. We'd been trying for a baby for 3 years with no success. The doctors hadn't found anything specifically wrong, just unexplained infertility, a medical term that somehow made me feel even more broken. Maybe if you weren't so stressed about work all the time, Derek suggested once, as if my job, the one that paid for half our mortgage and all of our health insurance, was just a hobby I could set aside. The perfect daughter. Then there was my family. My parents had immigrated from Taiwan before I was born, working impossible hours to give me opportunities they never had. I was grateful, truly, but gratitude in my family came with expectations. Why are you still at that same company? My father would ask during our weekly Sunday dinners. Your cousin Brian started his own business last year. He just bought a lake house. My mother was sutler. Mrs. Lynn's daughter just made partner at her law firm. Remember when you two were in the same piano class? I always thought you were more talented. I'd nod and change the subject, usually by offering to help with dishes or bringing out dessert. More invisible labor to avoid being seen. My younger sister, Olivia, had no such problems. She was a pediatric surgeon with 2 perfect children and a husband who looked like he belonged in a men's fashion magazine. She'd sweep in late to family dinners, apologizing for the emergency surgery that had kept her, and everyone would fawn. Sophie understands, my mother would say. She doesn't have as many responsibilities. Childless, stuck in middle management, married to a man who saw me as part of the furniture. Clearly my life was uncomplicated. Right? The collapse. It started with a headache. Not just any headache. This one felt like someone had replaced my brain with molten lead. I've been having them for weeks, but popping ibuprofen and pushing through. That Tuesday morning, I woke up with the worst one yet. Derek had already left for work. He had an early meeting. I called Kendall to say I'd be late. Today, Sophie, the Bluestream presentation is at 11. We need those revised mock-ups. I know, I'm sorry. I just need to see a doctor quickly. I'll work on them as soon as. We all get headaches, Sophie. Take an aspirin and power through. That's what being a professional means. I remember staring at my phone after he hung up, my vision blurry with pain and unshed tears. I swallowed for ibuprofen dry, put on a blazer over my wrinkled blouse, and drove to the office. I made it through the lobby and halfway across the open office floor before the world tilted sideways. I heard someone gasping. Was that me? And then nothing. I woke up in the hospital with a diagnosis of meningitis. Apparently, I'd been pushing through the early symptoms for weeks. The doctor said I was lucky. Another day and the outcome might have been very different. You need complete rest, the neurologist told me. At least 4 to 6 weeks. No work, minimal stress. I nodded, already wondering how I'd manage to work remotely. Kendall would expect it. Derek would need. I'm serious, the doctor interrupted my thoughts. This isn't optional. Your body is shutting down because you've ignored it for too long. I spent 3 days in that hospital room. Derek visited once, for 20 minutes, bringing a wilted bouquet from the hospital gift shop and complaints about having to make his own dinner. My phone stayed eerily silent. No messages from Kendall asking about work. No texts from coworkers wishing me well. Even my mother's check-in was brief. Are you coming to Sunday dinner? I'm making your father's favorite. On the 4th day, as a nurse helped me prepare for discharge, I scrolled through Instagram out of habit. And there it was, a photo of my team at Kendall Davis gathered around a conference table covered with champagne bottles and takeout containers. The caption read, "Celebrating our biggest win yet. The Blue Stream campaign is officially a go. Hashtag teamwork, hashtag crushed it." I zoomed in on the image. Ryan was holding up my presentation boards, the ones I'd stayed up until 2 a.m. finishing before my collapse. The mock-ups I'd designed were visible on the screen behind them. My work, my ideas, my campaign. Not a single mention of me. Not one. I scrolled further and felt my stomach drop. Derek had posted too. A photo of himself and a woman I recognized as Mira, a designer from his firm. They were at our favorite restaurant, the one I'd been asking to go to for our anniversary next month. His caption, "Working dinner with a brilliant mind." Design conversations that last until closing time are the best conversations. Hashtag architect life. Working dinner. Right. The comment section was filled with heart emojis and innuendos thin as tissue paper. I put down my phone and stared out the window at the Chicago skyline. Something inside me, something that had been bending and stretching for years, finally snapped. The awakening. The house was empty when I got home. Derek had left a note on the kitchen counter at a work retreat this weekend. Didn't want to disturb your recovery. Leftovers in fridge. The leftovers were a half-eaten container of 2-day-old Thai food. His favorite, not mine. I stood in our kitchen, the one I'd painted myself because Derek thought hiring painters was a waste, and laughed until I cried. Then just cried. When the tears finally stopped, I felt hollowed out but strangely calm. I walked through the house, really seeing it for the first time in years. How the artwork was all Derek's choices. How the bookshelves held his architecture volumes, but none of my mystery novels. How even the coffee mugs, all sleek, minimalist designs, were picked for his aesthetic. Where was I in this house? In this marriage? In my own life? That night, I slept in the guest room. The next morning, instead of making a smoothie for Derek, who wasn't even there, I made pancakes for myself, something I hadn't done in years because Derek considered them empty carbs. They were delicious. I opened my laptop, intending to check work emails, but instead created a new document. I titled it, "The Invisible Woman." And I began to write. I wrote about waking up in a hospital and realizing no one had noticed I was gone. I wrote about seeing my work celebrated without me. I wrote about a marriage that felt like another job, where I was always the employee, never the partner. I wrote without filtering, without worrying who might read it or what they might think. For once, I didn't care about being nice or appropriate or professional. I was just honest. When I finished, I had over 3,000 words. I read them back, feeling a strange mix of horror and liberation. I couldn't send this to anyone. It was too raw, too real, too. My phone pinged with a text from Kendall. "Need you to remote in for the client call tomorrow. Ryan doesn't understand the analytics framework you set up." No, how are you feeling? No acknowledgement of my hospitalization. Just another demand. Something shifted inside me. I opened a free blogging platform I'd used years ago for a work project, dusted off my old account, and pasted my entire document. I added a simple title: What happens when no one notices you're gone? My finger hovered over the publish button. Did I dare? The phone pinged again. Derek, where did you put my blue tie? The one with the subtle pattern? Need it for dinner with clients tonight. I hit publish. Then I turned off my phone, took 2 of my prescribed pain medications, and slept for 14 hours straight. The echo. I woke up to my laptop pinging with notification sounds. Blinking groggily, I opened it to find my inbox flooded with comments on my blog post. Hundreds of them. This is exactly how I feel at my job. I could have written this about my marriage. Are you secretly living my life? I'm crying at my desk reading this. Thank you for saying what I couldn't. I stared at the screen in disbelief. The post had been shared thousands of times overnight. A popular women's website had picked it up and reposted it with my permission, which they hadn't asked for, but I wasn't mad about it. Hashtag The Invisible Woman was trending in several cities. My hand shaking, I turned on my phone. Dozens of text messages, most from numbers I didn't recognize. Emails from people who had somehow found my personal address. And one voicemail from Derek. Hey, your sister called me? Said she's been trying to reach you. Something about a blog post going viral? Anyway, I'll be home late. Don't wait up. He hadn't read it. Of course not. But others had. So many others. I spent the day responding to comments, my head spinning. People weren't just reading my words. They were recognizing themselves in them. Women and men alike wrote about feeling unseen, unappreciated, used. What are you going to write next? Was the most common question. Next? I hadn't thought about a next. This had been a moment of raw emotion, of breakdown. Not the start of whatever this was becoming. But as I read comment after comment, I realized I had more to say. A lot more. I opened a new document and began typing. Day 1 of being visible. The transformation. I wish I could say Derek read my blog and had an epiphany. That Kendall realized my value and begged me to return with a promotion. That my family suddenly understood me. None of that happened. Derek did read it eventually, after his mother called him, horrified that her daughter-in-law was airing dirty laundry online. His response was exactly what I'd expected. Denial, then anger, then emotional manipulation. Is this how you really see our marriage? As some kind of servitude. Do you know how this makes me look? My colleagues are reading this. I've been under so much pressure at work. I thought you understood that. A year ago, I would have apologized. I would have taken it all back, deleted the post, made his favorite dinner, and spent weeks making it up to him. Instead, I said, yes, that's exactly how I see our marriage. And the fact that your first concern is how it makes you look tells me everything I need to know. I moved out the next day, into a small apartment that cost too much and had a view of an alley. It was the first place that had ever been completely, solely mine, and I loved every square inch of it. Kendall was more straightforward. Your position has been filled. Ryan's handling your clients now. We'll mail your personal items. I wasn't surprised, but it still hurt. 7 years, gone with a single phone call. My mother was predictably mortified. Why would you share such private things with strangers? What will people think? My father, surprisingly, said nothing. But a week later, he showed up at my new apartment with a small plant and an envelope containing $5,000 in cash. For new beginnings, he said gruffly, then left before I could respond. Olivia, my perfect sister, called me at midnight the day after the first post went live. Holy shit, Sophie, she said, and I could hear that she'd been crying. I had no idea. I'm so sorry. I've been so caught up in my own life that I never saw what was happening to yours. That conversation lasted until dawn, the first real talk we'd had in years. Meanwhile, my blog was exploding. I wrote every day about recovery, about setting boundaries, about recognizing your own worth. I wrote about small victories, cooking meals I actually liked, saying no to unwanted invitations, sleeping in the middle of the bed. Women responded with their own stories. A community formed in the comments section, people supporting each other, sharing resources, celebrating small acts of self-reclamation. 2 weeks in, a literary agent emailed me. 3 weeks in, a women's magazine asked me to write a monthly column. A month in, a podcast wanted to interview me. And through it all, I kept writing, kept sharing, kept becoming more visible, not just to others, but to myself. The reckoning. Financial reality hit hard around week 6. My savings were dwindling. The advance from the book deal wouldn't arrive for months. I needed income. I'd been avoiding job applications, dreading the return to another Kindle, another place where I'd be used and overlooked. But bills don't pay themselves, even for minor internet celebrities. Just as I was updating my resume, an email arrived from a name I recognized. Zoe Williams, the founder of Artemis Digital, a women-led marketing firm I'd always admired. "I've been reading your blog," she wrote. "Your insights on visibility and value resonate with our company philosophy. I also looked up some of your campaigns. The Blue Stream work was exceptional. Would you be interested in talking about a position with us?" The interview with Zoe wasn't like any I'd had before. Instead of asking about my willingness to work late or take on extra projects, she asked about my ideas, my approach to client relationships, my thoughts on work-life boundaries. "We don't want people who'll burn out for us," she said. "That's not sustainable for anyone. We want your best work, and that comes from a balanced life." I almost cried right there in her office. The salary she offered was 40% higher than what I'd been making at Kendall Davis. The position, senior creative strategist, was 2 levels above my previous title. "This is what you're worth in the market," Zoe said matter-of-factly. "Probably more, actually, but we'll revisit after your first 6 months." I accepted on the spot. The rebuilding. Life settled into a new rhythm. I worked at Artemis during the day, writing campaigns for clients who actually knew my name. I wrote for my blog, now called Visible Woman, in the evenings and on weekends. The community continued to grow. The book was coming together. The divorce was proceeding amicably enough. Derek had moved on to Mira officially and seemed almost relieved that our marriage was ending. I was definitely relieved. I made new friends, real ones, who asked how I was doing and actually listened to the answer. Some were from the blog community. Others were colleagues at Artemis. My relationship with Olivia deepened into something authentic, and even my parents were slowly adjusting to this new version of their daughter. 6 months after that first hospital stay, I found myself sitting on the small balcony of my apartment, watching the sunset reflect off neighboring windows. My phone rang, my agent with news about international rights for the book. As I talked with her, I checked my email to find an invitation to speak at a women's leadership conference. When the call ended, I sat in the growing darkness thinking about visibility, about how being seen, really seen, starts with seeing yourself clearly first. My illness had been terrible, but it had also been a gift, the moment when the fog cleared and I finally recognized what was happening to me. The moment when I decided to become visible. I opened my laptop and began to write a new post. 6 months ago, I disappeared and no one noticed. Today, I'm more visible than I've ever been. To others, yes, but more importantly, to myself. Here's what I've learned along the way. The new beginning. The conference hall was packed. From backstage, I could hear the murmur of 1,000 voices. My book, The Invisible Woman, How I Disappeared and Found Myself, had been out for 2 weeks and had debuted on the New York Times bestseller list. Now I was about to give the keynote address at the Women in Business Leadership Summit. Me, Sophie Chen, who used to take notes in meetings that no one ever read. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Knock 'em dead, sis. We're all watching the live stream. Even Dad figured out how to use the link." Another from Zoe. "The whole office is cheering for you. No pressure." Winking face. And dozens more from blog readers, new friends, and supporters I'd never met in person. I smoothed down the dress I'd chosen for myself. Bright red, not the muted colors I used to hide in, and took a deep breath. The MC was introducing me. Her story resonated with millions of women around the world, starting a movement about visibility in workplaces, relationships, and families. Please welcome Sophie Chen. As I walked onto the stage to thunderous applause, I thought about that woman in the hospital bed 6 months ago, invisible even in her crisis. I wished I could tell her what was coming. The spotlight was warm on my face as I approached the microphone. 6 months ago, I was invisible, I began, my voice strong and clear. Today, I'm standing in front of 1,000 people who know my name. But the real miracle isn't that you can see me now. It's that finally, after 34 years, I can see myself. The room erupted in applause, but I could still hear my own heartbeat, steady and sure. Visible at last, to the person who mattered most, me. The end. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more incredible content.